What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We've got a tremendous interview for you today. It's Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focused, one of the biggest brains in the industry, and he is fantastic when it comes to specifically us gathering some free agency intel and what the rest of the league might view these players as being worth on the open market. And when I say these players, I mean specifically Patriots players. Kyle Duggar, Mike Onwenu, Hunter Henry. We even get into that conversation a bit as well, because I view him as maybe the third most important free agent for New England this offseason. But before we get into the conversation, just to give you a quick update, if you've been living under a rock, if you listen to this podcast, generally speaking, when it comes to Patriots news, you ain't living under a rock. But Kyle Duggar has been given the transition tag by the Patriots, which would, if he played on the tag, pay him a shade under $14 million for 2024. I think it's a smart move. And the reason I say that, I said it on Early Edition earlier this week, as a negotiating tool, it makes sense in a variety of ways. Number one, it's much closer to what his average annual value on his next long-term contract should be than the franchise tag is. The franchise tag for a safety is $17 million. Now, with the franchise tag, you get that player. It's $17 million, fully guaranteed. He's going to be on your roster. There's always the possibility of a tag and trade situation, but that's the idea. With the transition tag, he's given a value. Again, 13.8, I believe, is where it sits right now. And if he doesn't receive an offer that he likes on the open market, then he plays 1 year in New England for that figure. If he does, and you're allowed to do this on the transition tag, which you're not on the franchise tag, seek and find an offer that he likes with another team. The transition tag requires that Duggar gives the Patriots the right of first refusal. So, say the Miami Dolphins, I'm just picking a team out of thin air. Say the Miami Dolphins want to give Kyle Duggar a 4-year deal worth $15 million a year because they think he is one of the 5 best safeties in football. He's, all pro caliber talent. And even though he hasn't received any of those types of honors, that's who he can be in their defense. Well, maybe the Patriots would shrug their shoulders and say, good luck, Kyle. Go for it. Or if they wanted to keep him, they would have to offer him that same contract. They would have to match that contract. So number one is a negotiating tool. I like it because the value makes sense. At $17 million, if you wanted to try to lock him up long-term, and then that $17 million franchise figure becomes the base value for what that player should be earning year after year, that doesn't make as much sense to me, because I think Kyle Duggar is a good player, but he's not that kind of player. He just hasn't proven that he's that kind of player. He's about to be 28 years old. This is really his one crack at a big deal in all likelihood. And so I understand it from his vantage point that he's really eager to see what's out there for him on the open market. And he'll have the opportunity to find that right now. But the Patriots will have the opportunity to match. The other reason I like it versus the franchise tag is because you're allowing the player to understand that you're interested in him and you want to keep him. And you like to, in the Patriots case, as Gerard Mayo said in a statement, even work out a long-term deal eventually. You almost use this to buy yourself some time. The franchise tag can be used in the same way, but because it prohibits the player from going out and seeking his value elsewhere, it can generate some acrimony between the two sides, especially on the player end. Players, generally speaking, don't want the franchise tag. You and I could talk about the tag and say $17 million guaranteed for 1 year. Yes, please. Sign me up. I'd be okay with that. But the players, in general, again, somebody like Kyle Duggar, this might be his one crack at a big long-term deal. He's gone into this offseason healthy, and he's at the height of his powers. He looks at the franchise tag and says, yeah, that's great, but if I could get a 4-year deal somewhere that is going to guarantee me fully $30-ish million, I'd much rather that than the 1 year with the risk of me getting injured for about half the amount in terms of guaranteed money. So you understand it from the player's standpoint. You're avoiding using that by using the transition tag instead. So it is in some ways by the team the friendlier tag to use, if that makes sense. Now you could always say, listen, I'm not so sure, Perry. Because if he gets that great deal from Miami you were just talking about, and then he's forced to give the Patriots the right of first refusal, and then the Patriots match that deal and he's forced to go back to New England, how is that friendly? Guy wanted to go to South Florida. No state income tax, by the way, down there. Slightly different situation in New England. The great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That still feels a little icky to me. And you might be right there too. So, like anything else, there are positives and negatives for both sides here. But I do understand why the Patriots used it. A couple of notes off the news that we now know Kyle Duggar's been given the transition tag. Number one, Mike Onwenu cannot be tagged. Transition, franchise, anything. Once you decide you're going to use either the transition tag or the franchise tag, you can't use the other one on another player. Okay, so there will be no tag for Mike Onwenu. The deadline is come and gone anyway. We're past that. No tag for Mike Onwenu. When it comes to transition tag usage, it is interesting to note it's very rare. We have 5 instances of this thing being used since the CBA changed in 2011. So you could go back to Jason Worrelds, linebacker in 2014, Alex Mack, center in 2014, Charles Clay, tight end in 2015, cornerback Kyle Fuller in 2018, and running back Kenyon Drake in 2019. Interesting to see how those situations eventually unfolded, right? So 2 of those players just played on the tag for 1 year, Worrelds and Kenyon Drake. 2 of those players had offers from other teams that were matched by their original team. So Alex Mack found himself a 5-year deal with Jacksonville. The Browns decided to match it. He goes and plays for the Browns. Kyle Fuller finds a 4-year deal from Green Bay in the division. They think they've got a good chance to get this talented corner in 2018. And the Bears say, no, you're staying in Chicago. They match that offer, and he stays with the Bears. Charles Clay is the one who found a deal that wasn't matched. So he got a 5-year deal with Buffalo. The Dolphins said, no, thank you. We won't be matching that. And they went their separate ways. The reason the Clay example is interesting to me and might be interesting to fans, we'll see. Let us know in the comments on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. We appreciate you always checking in there, chiming in there. Conversation's fantastic. Charles Clay ended up not counting towards the compensatory pick formula for the Dolphins, even though they lost him to a version of free agency. He was not a compensatory free agent, though, according to the NFL, because he had been tagged with the transition tag. And so that's the precedent with New England. If Kyle Duggar is on the transition tag and signs a deal with someone else that the Patriots don't match, he would not count towards their compensatory pick formula. Okay, so you could view that potentially as a drawback for the Patriots. Now, there's fine print here. Now we're really getting into the weeds. Now it really becomes the next Pats conversation. Because I know you freaks, you love this as much as I do. Let's dive into some details here when it comes to the comp pick formula. Hell yeah. That gets me fired up. The compensatory pick formula works thusly. It's based on free agents out as well as free agents in. So, in an alternate universe, say Kyle Duggar's not tagged. Or let's go with Mike Onwenu. Let's go with that option instead. Try to keep this thing as clear as possible. Mike Onwenu, no tag. He's an unrestricted free agent at the start of the new league year. If he signs elsewhere, he would count towards the Patriots' compensatory pick formula. And if it's a big enough deal, if he plays enough snaps, makes enough starts, say even goes to a Pro Bowl, that could end up being a pretty good comp pick for the Patriots next year. So in 2025. That's how most people understand the comp pick formula to work. However, if and when the Patriots sign a free agent who is of Onwenu's ilk in terms of the salary that player gets, the number of starts that player might make. It doesn't even have to get that specific. If it's a similarly valued free agent who's coming to the Patriots in free agency, then those two moves, in terms of the comp pick formula, would cancel each other out. Now the Patriots don't get a pick back from Mike Onwenu. And the fact of the matter is, based on my understanding, if you end up signing more compensatory free agents, so free agents who sign deals that are large enough that they qualify for the formula, if you sign more of those than you lose, then you're not getting a comp pick. Let's get back to Kyle Duggar. And this might be playing into the Patriots' thinking as they use the transition tag on him, understanding that if he goes and signs somewhere else, they won't get a comp pick for him. What they might be saying, as they're listening to this podcast right now, I'm sure, is doesn't matter to us. We weren't getting a comp pick for Kyle Duggar anyway, because we have so much money to spend and so many roster holes to spend it on that whether Duggar left via unrestricted free agency or with the transition tag in tow, this isn't our year to be racking up comp picks anyway, because in all likelihood, we're going to be bringing in more qualifying free agents than we are going to be losing. And so I just find that part of it interesting, all that whole back and forth there. Final note on this. Let's dive even deeper into the weeds. What's below the weeds? I don't know. We're getting to one of the lower layers of the Earth's crust now. There is precedent for a team pulling the transition tag kind of last minute so that player counts toward the comp pick formula. Back in 2016, the Dolphins did this with Olivier Vernon. Remember Olivier Vernon? Great player for a time. They put the transition tag on him in 2016. They must have got an inkling that he was going to get a deal that they weren't willing to match. They pulled the tag. He became a true, really unrestricted free agent, thus counted towards the comp pick formula. And the Dolphins, smart move by them. And maybe they learned from the Charles Clay example from the year before when they did not get a comp pick for Charles Clay. But it was a smart move by them with Vernon because the following year they got a third-round comp pick. So there you go. Again, the Patriots, in all likelihood, this is not going to be a big comp pick year for them. I'm assuming they're going to bring in enough people that even if they lose Duggar, Onwenu, Hunter Henry, name your Patriots free agent, Ezekiel Elliott, Trent Brown, these guys all could be compensatory free agents. But the Patriots have to bring in so many that there's a decent chance, in my opinion, that they end up not qualifying for any comp picks in 2025, whether Kyle Duggar was on the transition tag or not. Okay, did that make anyone's brain hurt? Because my brain's starting to hurt a little bit. We appreciate you just for listening as long as you have at this point and trying to follow that through your ear holes. It's why you're the best listeners in the podcast universe. We appreciate you. Let's get to our conversation right now. Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, unbelievable intel on Patriots free agents and what they might be worth. Mike Onwenu, Kyle Duggar, Hunter Henry. What does Brad think? Let's talk to him right now. Very excited to have with us now on the Next Pats podcast, Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, cap guru, NFL analyst. He does it all for them. Brad, thanks for being with us, man.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Have to ask you about this Patriots free agent class. Even though we're here, Indianapolis, NFL Combine, everybody's thinking draft, this is also the place where inroads are made when it comes to free agency. And the two biggest free agents, I think, that we've talked about a lot locally are Mike Onwenu and Kyle Duggar. And the news we'll start with is Mike Onwenu has fired his agents. It now appears as though he might be representing himself. Is this good news or bad news for the Patriots if they want to retain him?
It definitely complicates matters. I think teams would rather negotiate with an agent that's gone through it, knows the process, because there is an element of you don't want to insult your guy, but teams do start with a lowball offer and kind of work off of that. So there's a lot of elements to it. Having that veil of protection is probably a good thing. it's weird timing. Like, look, players represent themselves. We were talking pre-show, Roquan Smith and Laramie Tunsil, guys that have top-of-market deals. To do it a week before free agency, when, like, look, teams are, like you said, this is tampering central. Everyone's having these conversations. It's a bit interesting. My understanding is agents that have reached out, like, they think he's going to represent himself. Smart guy, Michigan grad, maybe he's good to go. But very interesting. And funny enough, Duggar changed his agent about a month ago, too. So both guys maybe didn't love the early extension conversations in New England. I don't know what the signal is there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially now with the regime change in New England, too. So whatever previous conversations had been had, you would think, are with Bill Belichick in mind, and Bill Belichick running the show, and this is where we're willing to go, where we're not willing to go. Now that might change with Elliot Wolf as the de facto general manager. When it comes to Onwenu, say he's reading Brad Spielberger on Pro Football Focus, and he sees what his average annual value could be in the market. What would he be finding? What do you think his value is as a free agent? What should he be asking for?
Yeah, I have a 4-year deal for $58 million, so $14.5 million per year. A strong guard deal. We're seeing the rise of the guard market, kind of a counter to the interior defenders getting all this money. Kind of plays that way. Agents always do that. If corners get more money, then receivers get more money. So I think guards are going to do well. At the same time, though, I mean, Robert Hunt in Miami. You have Kevin Dotson in L.A. Like, there are some very, very good players. Obviously Onwenu has the tackle flex too, which adds value. But anyway, yeah, 14, 15 mil, a good deal. But not quite top of market.
So that pays him as a guard, not a tackle. What if he goes to teams and says, hey, I've proven over multiple years now, even though the Patriots never wanted to start him at tackle, but I've proven that I can play there and I can play there competently. I need to be paid as a starting right tackle. He's not Laramie Tunsil, but I need to be paid as a starting right tackle. Would that impact his value at all in terms of what he might be asking for?
See, that's the fascinating dynamic. Is, I mean, from a PFF grade standpoint, at right tackle, he's been phenomenal. One of the highest, pressure allowed rates in the entire NFL when he plays there. But if your incumbent team, the team that drafted you, developed you, doesn't want to keep you there, just put him at right tackle, plug him, leave it alone. It's probably a signal, right? So it is a guard contract. It's projected as a guard contract, and he gets a slight ding too. He's a gap scheme guard. Like teams now want these 290-pound guards, not the Onwenu, profile.
They want guys that can run, that can sort of haul ass to the sideline. Like you think about all these McShanahan schemes that are across the NFL right now, where it's a lot, at least it was for a time. I think it's started to change a little bit. There's more gap in San Francisco. There's more gap schemes in LA right now. But the Patriots, Alex Van Pelt, is coming from a Cleveland system, which is based off the Kubiak system, which is essentially the Shanahan system. And I think they're going to be looking for linemen that are athletes. And maybe they feel like Onwenu can do that. But if he doesn't necessarily fit the profile, it'll be interesting to see exactly where they're going to go. Are there because tackle is such a gaping void on the Patriots roster right now, who are the best of the rest if Onwenu is eventually a guard? How can they address this in free agency so that they don't feel like they have to address it and maybe reach in the draft?
It is tough, right? Like, a good tackle is probably not hitting the market. I mean, Trent Brown might be my number one tackle on my list. Or I guess Tyron Smith is, but I don't think Tyron Smith is going to go to the Patriots, with all due respect. I think it's stay in Dallas, maybe go to, like, Kansas City, or stay there. So, an old friend in Jermaine Illuminor, I think, is a legitimately starting right tackle. He's proven himself as a former journeyman Patriot. But again, does he fit the Alex Van Pelt profile? Like, no. He's a good pass protector that is not going to get out in space, pull lead out the right side. Like, it's not really his game.
Will be really interesting to see how they try to fit it in. Jonah Williams is a free agent, I believe, as well. Is he somebody who's going to be he would be paid, I would guess, as a right tackle because he's coming off a season at right tackle as opposed to having played left previously in his career?
He'll probably try to go back to the left, try to get a team to say, hey, I'm a left tackle. I feel more comfortable there. He did play right tackle at Alabama, too. Like, it wasn't this past year was his first time there. I have same thing. It's like 4 years, 60. So similar to an Onwenu because, first-round pedigree, tackle, all those things. But injury question marks, again, we're going back to the scheme thing. Like, I don't know if he's a great fit in that scheme either.
Okay, you mentioned Kyle Duggar and how he changed agents. He is now represented by Andy Sims and Wesley Spencer, guys that have represented the McCourties in the past, Jonathan Jones in the past, obviously guys that the Patriots are familiar with. How good is he, Brad? Because I know the Patriots really like him, and they really think he's one of the best safeties in the league. I don't know if the rest of the league feels that way, and I wonder if the Patriots are going to end up being willing to pay Kyle Duggar more than anyone else just because of how they see his fit in Foxborough.
Yeah, they are at the forefront of playing fewer linebackers, playing these hybrid type guys. And Duggar, look, can carry number 3 receivers, can cover tight ends, has the size to do that, of course, and obviously as a run defender is up there among safeties. But I'm with you. Like, he is, I'm not going to say he's a liability in coverage, but he's not, these safeties that you can move around, play in the nickel, do different things with. they probably value him more than most teams, right? So that's the challenge there. And then the other piece is he's going to be 28 years old coming off his first contract. He was an older draft pick to begin with, been a good player, but safety is a position that falls off pretty quickly. Like, teams in free agency aren't trying to go after a 28-year-old safety.
It's really interesting when you look at his age. I mean, when he was drafted, relative to other draft picks his year, kind of ancient. Jabril Peppers and he, I believe, are 5 months apart in terms of their birthdays, but Peppers has 3 more years in the league than Duggar does. It's wild. But he's that physical presence. We know that that's what they want to do. They want to get downhill, be aggressive, play with that sort of style. What would a sensible value be contractually for him? Is he looking at being, somewhere in the top 5 of safeties, or is that a little too rich?
I can't really get there. It's interesting, too, not to go full agent conversation, but, I mean, you left an agency that reps every top safety on the market to go to the other one. And you mentioned the Patriot connection is real with Andy Sims and those guys. And Jonathan Jones, I thought, got a phenomenal deal for the player. Good player, not a bad deal for the team, but a strong contract. So, no, to me, he's more like the 12 to 15 per year range. It's a tough position in free agency. Like, one of the biggest lessons I've learned from doing this, like Marcus Williams, for example, comes from New Orleans, phenomenal player, young, gets $14 million a year in Baltimore. Jesse Bates got 16 last year. I don't think he's in that caliber of player. So, 12 to 14 range, I suppose.
Okay. I want to ask you about tight end really quickly and then have sort of a bigger picture question for you. Hunter Henry was making, I believe, $12.5 million per year on his last deal with the Patriots. Didn't necessarily live up to that. I do, though, think he is valued in New England. And Gerard Mayo has even mentioned him as one of the leaders for the offense. He's not under contract right now, but it's basically him and David Andrews. Those are your veteran leaders on that side of the ball. Will he have to be comfortable taking a little bit of a pay cut versus his last deal wherever he ends up, whether it's New England or somewhere else?
For sure. I have it 2 years, $12.5 million. So tight end's tough, too. 30 years old at tight end is ancient. I mean, remember, Gronkowski retired at 29. So, yeah, it's going to be a pay cut, probably half of what he was making before. But I do think he had a role. Like, in the red zone on third downs, money situations, like, he was an important piece of that offense.
So $12.5 million total over the 2 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So that would be a significant one. And if it'll just be so interesting how they fill out this roster, because if it's New England versus somewhere else, whether it's going back to LA or playing for another team that might be viewed as more of a contender, if it's going to be $6 million no matter where he goes, he might rather be in one of those places than in New England, which is very clearly in the middle of a rebuild that he might never see the other side of.
That's fair, right? Where in 2021, you probably bought into the buzz. Like, all right, if Mac Jones figures this out, they obviously made the playoffs his first year. So there was reason for optimism. Kind of funny they've hit him and Jonnu Smith. But, yeah, you can make that argument. Maybe he wants to go to a team where he can, hey, last couple of years of my career, I'm still a piece of an offense, and I want to contend.
Big picture. We just got finished talking to Elliot Wolf at the podium here. His first media availability period with us in New England. We talked about the Packer way. And I'm curious because he mentioned in terms of younger players, what that means. Playing your younger players, drafting, developing, identifying your guys, and trying to keep them around. But what does the Packer way mean in terms of free agency? Is he going to be somebody based on that history that's going to be willing to go out and burn some cash, as Gerard Mayo put it a few weeks ago?
Yeah, so look, the Brian Gutekunst way, the newer age, they have spent on some players, some splashes, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, we talked pre-show, some of those guys they've spent on. Historically, though, they're one of the lowest spenders in the entire NFL. They are actually, everyone says draft and develop, they are actually draft and develop. So, again, here and there they can make moves, and they will. I don't think it'll be 2021, but I think it could be similar, where they say, we're probably taking a rookie quarterback. Let's make sure, like you said, he has some pass protectors, some pass catchers. Once they get back to kind of competitiveness, I think they're going to try to shy away from spending a lot in free agency.
So you can't see like a big splash on Calvin Ridley or, on Michael Pittman if he doesn't get tagged. Or could you envision anything like that if they're trying to stay true to this Packer model? Is that unlikely? I
think it's more the mid-tier. Look, like Matthew Judon's signing was phenomenal. It was a $13.5 million when he signed that deal. Overplayed that by a mile in the early years. You mentioned the both tight ends as well, Jalen Mills. I think there'll just be more spending on mid-tier guys, hoping for upside, buying in on buy low type of players. I don't know if I see the splashes, but like a Marquise Brown, maybe takes a prove-it deal, kind of been injured recently, but when healthy, I think still is a good football player. I think it's more that market still.
All right, Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus. Thanks so much for being with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great stuff there from Brad. Great to catch up with him at the Combine. Now, that was obviously before the Patriots had placed the transition tag on Kyle Duggar, but based on that conversation, I think Brad's seeing things the same way the Patriots are. Your value on an average annual basis, Kyle Duggar, is between $12 and $14 million. That's where the transition tag puts him. That to me is why it is the transition tag is an intelligent negotiating tool in this instance. I think it's accurate in terms of the value that it places on Kyle Duggar, or the implied value that it places on Kyle Duggar. Great stuff there from him. We had so many great conversations all week long at the Combine. We still have leftover great conversations for you from the Super Bowl. We are going to pummel you with content, free agency content, draft content for the next 8 weeks. I think we've got 8 weeks before the end of April, and we're really neck deep in draft at that point. So keep an eye out for all of our episodes. The next one's going to be great for you as well. Another Combine conversation, this one with the NFL Network's Bucky Brooks. We're talking about the Packer way. That's how he learned as a scout. Obviously, Bucky was a player, but then got into scouting, and he learned under that sort of system, and he gives us some great intel as to what Elliot Wolf might value, understanding that system the way Bucky Brooks does. So keep an eye out for that conversation. Will be coming at you very, very soon. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Next Pats podcast. We'll talk to you next time.